What happens when an action star makes more good movies than the ones he's actually famous for? Not every strong performance ends up in the spotlight, and some films just don't get the credit they deserve even when the actor delivers. Some of these movies went in new directions, and others focused more on acting than they did fighting. So let's count down 10 of the most underrated Van Damme movies that deserve a second look. Starting our list at number 10 is Shepherd: Border Patrol, a 2008 action film directed by Isaac Florentine. Van Damme plays Jack Robideau, a former New Orleans cop who's moved to Columbus, New Mexico to join the Border Patrol. The movie was filmed in Bulgaria over 47 days in 2007. The movie also features Scott Adkins in an early role that showcased his martial arts ability, and it also includes Van Damme's daughter, Bianca Van Varenberg. It's one of Van Damme's later movies that still works well, helped by Florentine's direction and the solid fight scenes. At number 9 is Inferno, also known as Desert Heat, a 1999 action thriller directed by John G. Avildsen, the same director behind Rocky and The Karate Kid. Van Damme plays Eddie Lomax, a depressed army vet wandering the desert with no real reason to live. After a group of local thugs steal his motorcycle and leave him for dead, he decides to stay in town and take revenge. The film is loosely based on the 1961 samurai film Yojimbo by Kurosawa. The original cut of the movie was titled Coyote Moon, but Van Damme disliked that version and had it re-edited. Avildsen later tried to have his name removed from the film, but he was unsuccessful. For me, it's a solid revenge story with good action, and I consider it one of Van Damme's most overlooked films from the late 90s. At number 8 is The Order, a 2001 action film directed by Sheldon Lettish. Van Damme takes on the role of Rudy Kaffmeyer, a playboy thief who travels to Israel after learning his father has gone missing. Lettish said the goal was to make a light-hearted action adventure in the style of Indiana Jones. He later explained that the film's biggest mistake was shifting to a more serious tone in the third act, instead of staying fun all the way through. The movie brought back Adele Kesey, who fans remember as Attila from Lionheart, and it gave Van Damme a more playful character after a run of darker films like Wake of Death. At number 7 is Replicant, a 2001 science fiction action film directed by Ringo Lam. Van Damme plays a dual role, a serial killer named Garrett and a genetically engineered clone created to help catch him. Michael Rooker co-stars as Jake Riley, the detective who must work with the clone to track down the original killer. It was Van Damme's second collaboration with Ringo Lam and the third time he played a dual role. Reviews at the time pointed out that the action scenes were really well staged and Van Damme still had the athletic ability to pull off the physical work. Some reviewers also praised his acting, saying he showed more emotional range than in many of his earlier films. In my opinion, it's an underrated entry that deserves much more credit than it actually gets. At number 6 is The Quest. This was Van Damme's directorial debut, and he plays Christopher Dubois, a New York thief in 1925 who gets sold into slavery, trains in Muay Thai, and eventually enters a secret martial arts tournament in Tibet where fighters from around the world compete for the Golden Dragon. The movie co-starred Roger Moore, James Remar, and Janet Gunn. It was hyped as Van Damme's ultimate martial arts film. Even though the film underperformed in the United States, it did a lot better internationally and ended up being a commercial success overall. When I first watched it, I was really disappointed because really I expected a Bloodsport sequel, but the tone, the story, they were so different. Now years later, honestly, it's a movie that improves when you stop comparing it to Bloodsport, and that's why I consider it as an underrated gem in his filmography. At number 5 is Knockoff, released in 1998 and directed by Tsui Hark. Van Damme takes on the role of Marcus Ray, a Hong Kong fashion designer who's involved in selling fake brand name products. He's trying to go straight though, but gets pulled back into danger when a new shipment of counterfeit goods turns out to be linked to a terrorist plot involving miniaturized bombs. Rob Schneider co-stars as Tommy Hendricks, who pretends to be Marcus's business partner but is actually a CIA agent. The movie mixes Hong Kong-style action with comedy, and even though it wasn't well received at the time, it has strong stunt work and a very different tone from most of Van Damme's films. At number 4 is Double Team. Van Damme plays Jack Quinn, counter-terrorist agent who is forced out of retirement to track down an international criminal named Stavros, played by Mickey Rourke. The score was composed by Gary Chang, best known to action fans for his work on Van Damme's Death Warrant and The Perfect Weapon, starring Jeff Speakman. The movie blends action with comedy, and even though it was criticized at release, the pairing of Van Damme and Rodman gave it a unique tone, while Mickey Rourke delivers one of the strongest villain roles from that period of Van Damme's career. At number 3 is Sudden Death. Van Damme takes on the role of Darren McCall, a former firefighter working security at a hockey arena during the Stanley Cup Finals. When a group of terrorists, led by Joshua Foss, played by Powers Booth, take the vice president and thousands of fans hostage, McCall becomes the only person who can stop the attack before the final buzzer. Before Van Damme was cast, the role was offered to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and Bruce Willis, but all three of them turned it down for different reasons. James Woods was also considered for the villain, but he passed on the role. The movie is basically Die Hard in a hockey stadium, but with Van Damme relying on more stunts and straight action instead of his usual martial arts fights. Also, you gotta give credit to Powers Booth, who plays an excellent villain. At number 2 is Cyborg, released in 1989 and directed by Albert Pyun. Van Damme plays Gibson Rickenbacker, a lone mercenary in a post-apocalyptic future who must save a cyborg carrying information that could save what's left of humanity. The movie was not originally planned as a Van Damme film. It was meant to be a sequel to the Masters of the Universe movie and a live-action Spider-Man film. When both projects fell apart due to financial problems, director Albert Pyun wrote the story of Cyborg in one weekend so the studio could reuse the material they had already paid for. Pyun first wanted Chuck Norris for the lead role, but Canon Films disagreed and they wanted Van Damme instead. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Cyborg, and I honestly believe it's one of Van Damme's most underrated movies. I love the setting, the fights, the story, the atmosphere. The only thing I have an issue with, it's too short. I wish the movie was longer and it had more action. Taking the top spot is In Hell, released in 2003 and directed by Ringo Lam. Van Damme takes on the role of Caillou LeBlanc, a man sent to a brutal Russian prison after killing the man who murdered his wife. Now, this isn't your typical martial arts movie that you would come to expect from Van Damme. Honestly, when I first watched it, I hated it. I wasn't a fan, but over time, I've come to see it as one of his strongest late career roles. The acting, the story, and the darker tone make it stand out, and that's why I consider In Hell the most underrated movie of his entire career. And there you have it, our top 10 underrated Van Damme movies. Now, these movies might not be the films he's most famous for, but they help tell the full story of his career beyond the blockbuster years and the mainstream spotlight. And we're not stopping here. In our next video, we're taking a closer look at another name who never got the full credit he deserved, a martial arts star from the 90s whose films were packed with talent, power, and skill. Until then, you can watch our video on the top 10 Shaw Brothers movies, where we've covered the films that helped shape martial arts cinema long before the 90s era. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.